Is it not yourself?
Oh, we are.
Yes, we are.
I was getting down to that. It's kind of high energy jingle, isn't it?
It is. It is. I decided to make a little starting movie for the start, and the sort of expectation was going to be chilled and calm, and then I just lost the plot with all the editing stuff and just went a bit over the top.
It's kind of highly portentous to have us both sitting here doing this at the end of that music is kind of wrong.
Exactly. We should... So as it says on our beautifully poised new ticker tape at the bottom, this is Crux Cast 64 with none other than Richard. You might have been thinking Richard Uridge, but it's Richard Uridge. It's Richard Uridge.
It could be many things, actually. Over the years, Eric, it's been Richard Uridge, Richard Uridog, which was the address.
No, hold on. Uridog.
Uridog. Udridge, Umbridge. It's been pretty much everything you can think of beginning with the letter U and one or two others.
Richard Umbridge. Richard Umbridge, really.
Not that I take offence.
Absolutely fantastic. So we're here. This is our Crux Cast, and I actually can't believe this is in my first foray into all the social malarkey. I started this little podcast, and it just became a little fascination. So we took a break for a year, and this is the second. We've been off for a year, and we brought it back. We're now doing it live, and this is our second one live. So it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you for asking me, and it's a pleasure. Well, I shouldn't say that, could I? Because it could all go downhill from this.
It could, and very likely will.
Questions that I can't answer, but I think it will be my pleasure too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna mainly have it just you and I. Let's just see if we got anybody saying hello. They will come. If any questions come in there, they'll come into the chat. Let me just have a little look. They'll come into that area there. So if they come in, I will pull them over and we'll take it from there. But first off, so people will know you from around about LinkedIn and other social areas and all the stuff that you do. The current gig is ACM training, as it says below. What's that all about?
Yeah, ACM training. It stands for All Communication Matters, and it's a training consultancy, training company that helps people with their media relations, helps them with their presentational skills, helps them with mainly the spoken word, but not exclusively, also the written word, because I firmly believe that words do matter. I mean, this is going to sound really pompous as a kind of opening ambit, but, jaw is better than war. And if words can start wars, they can damn well end them. So we just need to be careful about the words we speak, the words we write, because they can be transformative in the workplace in a really, really positive way. And not everybody feels as if they're good with words, so we help them get better.
Fantastic. And how do you do that? How do you help them get better?
Okay, well, for example, just today I've been working with somebody who is experiencing a really challenging family situation. Without going into too much detail, her father is in prison unjustly, and she wants to use the media to get her plight into the public domain to help release her father from prison. So I've been helping her shape her key messages to work out what's really important that she communicates to the wider public via the media, and then helping her work out with some practical tools and with some practice how she can deliver those key messages in a media interview or in a series of media interviews without having to worry too much about the questions she's asked, using techniques that politicians tend to use really badly and sound slippery and evasive, but used well can make an interview really productive from the interviewee's perspective. As I say, saying what they want to say to the audience without getting too wrapped up in the line of questioning, which could conceivably even be counterproductive if they're not careful.
Yeah. My goodness. Right.
So we will, and I will demonstrate how I'll just sidestep the issue and deliver one of my key messages.
It was beautifully done, and I feel transfixed. It's like look into the eyes, not around the eyes. Look into the eyes, not around the eyes. Okay. Where do I sign? So we're gonna come this fascination with words and the power of words and putting words together in a way where they're presented and laid out to affect or effect a situation. It's been a fascination for a little while in the Uridge Book of Life, and we're going to circle back a little bit, and we'll come back to ACM towards the end. But I thought it'd be nice to go back all the way back to school time, even, if that's all right.
Of course
Can we
it
do
is. Yeah. Well, look,
Yeah.
I tell you what, if I press a button here and I can show you something, this is going to be hideous. That if you have got anybody about to comment, they'll probably need to go away and be sick quietly in a corner.
Oh, look at him.
Hey, look at those fatty teeth. Look at that slightly strange, I think self-administered fringe. I think that probably involved a Swiss Army knife.
Swiss Army knife, yeah.
Rather than a trip to the local butchers. I mean, the local hairdressers.
They always do say, if you're going to do a fringe, pull it over to the side and cut straight up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the technique, isn't it? That is
what
it.
do you know about fringes, Eric?
Very little. I tend to make them portable fringes these days.
It's so much easier to
so much easier
when it's not on your head.
Stick it in the washing machine. You can go out. Exactly. That little chap was wearing the uniform of where?
So that uniform, that tie, was St George of England Primary School in a place called Toddington, which was a relatively sort of small village in Bedfordshire, just north of Luton, mate, just north of Luton. So I was a schoolboy there from the... When I say it out loud, this sounds really like a long while ago. The 60s. In the 1960s, I was a schoolboy, and I finished my schooling in 1979. I remember the hot summer of 1976. I was just in the year before my O-levels, as they were called then, rather than GCSE, so a bloody long while ago, and so far ago that without looking at photographs, I don't remember anything.
So that little guy, was he... albeit that was primary school, right? But was he already showing signs of being sporty or academic or artistic, or what was?
In a word, sporty. Definitely not at that stage, because for a lot of people of that generation, and actually for subsequent generations, school sport is quite highly organised, structured, involves teamwork. Understandably, because you got a load of kids together in the same class, so a team sport makes perfect sense. But I was lousy at team sports. There was a famous Northern Irish footballer called Georgie Best at the time I was growing up, and my nickname at school, it still hurts to this day, otherwise I wouldn't remember, would I, was Georgie Worst. I was so rubbish at football that I'm literally not kidding to tell you that the jumpers for the goalposts got picked before somebody chose me for their playground team. I was geeky. I had 3 legs. I was like a baby giraffe with knock knees. I couldn't play football. Cricket, I was scared of the hard ball, so I'd play with a tennis ball, but not with a cricket ball. That's crazy. That's too hard. So sporty, definitely not. Academic.
Was the eye on the classroom or music or were you a bit theatrical, darling?
Oh, darling, yes. My mother and father would say I was very theatrical. I was interested, and I am to this day, in what makes things, and in particular, what makes people tick. So to start with, it was kind of not formal lessons as much as the teachers who were inspirational because they got you to take things apart or to pull the bark off trees and to look at the beetles or the fungus underneath the bark. So I've always been a really kind of tactile, hands-on learning kind of person, and anything to do with that. So physics, chemistry, practical stuff, more so than the sort of rather more esoteric mathematics, pure maths, even English. I mean, my English master at secondary school, my English teacher, if he was still alive, would be shocked to hear that I've made most of my professional life one way or another around words. I mean, he would be amazed, and I hope pleasantly amazed.
Yeah. Mum and Dad, what were the sort of domestic occupations or the home occupations?
Well, Mum, very much the home occupation. The housewife, as many women in those days were, full-time mum, full-time wife, running a magnificent family home on behalf of my family, my sister and I, and my dad, who was out working pretty long hours as a local newspaper journalist. and a wonderful, wonderful woman who's still with us. And some people will know from me on LinkedIn and elsewhere that mum's living with dementia right now, which is a bugger of a disease, and which pains people who have relatives with it no end. And my father died in 2020. 2000, so 22 years ago. Worked his way up to editor of a local newspaper. And I guess, in a sense, that's perhaps where, subconsciously at least, my original interest in words came from. Although, you know what it's like, pig-headed children don't want to do anything to do with what their mums and dads are doing, and almost do the opposite just to be cussed and contrary-wise.
But I imagine, he was it the editor of the Luton News?
It was, yeah. That was one of the many things he worked on. But
would he be sitting at home on the typewriter doing his thing, and you'd be watching all this? I've got this romantic idea of him sitting at home and I
can remember. It's funny the things you remember. I remember the smell of a hot metal printing press. So the Luton News, like all papers in those days, was printed on a hot metal printing press, and it used to make an extraordinary racket, a kind of visceral kind of sound, and a smell that was half molten metal, half hot ink and stretched warm paper. And this thing was like a beast in the basement of the building that he worked. And on print day, the whole building, literally the whole building, would vibrate and shake. And seeing the words come off on the printing press, and to hear all of that, as I say, that kind of visceral stuff, it must have made an impression. I can still hear it, and I can still smell it today. And there's something, we've gained so much with words and social media and modern methods of communication, but the care and the attention and the time that it took to get words from an interviewee's mouth into a reporter's notebook, onto a typewriter sheet, onto a hot metal printing press, and then out via the distribution network to the paper boys to stick it through somebody's letterbox. That was extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And so that maybe an early spark there. You went through school. So primary school, I'm guessing, was like, for most kids, it was just a fun place to be. You get on with it. And then secondary school, was that a place where you blossomed or retracted, or did you hide away, or did you become the man you are today?
I suppose all of the above, really. It's a time where all the hormones and all the growing up, the really significant leaps forward developmentally, physically, mentally are taking place. So, as I say, all of the above. I was lucky or unlucky enough to be in a system in Bedfordshire that still exists to this day and is a bit of an outlier. So rather than having primary school and secondary school, just changing schools once in your childhood, Bedfordshire, in its infinite wisdom, decided to have a 3-tier system, so that at age 11, you'd go to a middle school, and then just as you settled into your middle school, 2 years later, you'd go to an upper school. And of course, moving schools is quite disruptive. You say goodbye to your friends, some of whom you do say hello to at the next school, some of whom go to a completely different school. So I had two changes of school in quite quick succession. And I think that was a bit disruptive. And I did go to a school where I had to make a whole new heap of friends. And at least, without this being too much like the psychiatrist's chair, I did struggle to make friends initially at the new school, because they were kind of different kids from a slightly different social milieu.
Oh, right. I see.
They was a bit upper class compared to a boy from a village near Luton.
Now, were you, and I'm only interested in this because it relates very much to my own life. Were you the chameleon, or did you just stay solid to what you were, or did you bend and flex a little bit?
No, I was the chameleon, and I still am. And my father and his father before him were, if I'm talking to the dustman down in the East End, I'll talk like a ruddy dustman. All right, how you going, geezer? And if I'm there with somebody in the House of Lords, I will speak like I'm in the House of Lords. Well, it drives my friends insane. They say, "Don't you realise?" And I don't even realise I'm putting on a voice. There's a word for it. I think it's kind of, there's a psychological kind of descriptor of people who are so keen to fit in that they become the people that they are trying to fit in with, and don't realise that other people might see that as slightly ingratiating or grating or just weird, frankly.
While you're busy mirroring and blending and all of that, people are going, "What's he doing?"
Yeah. Yes, he doesn't speak like that normally.
Oh, hello. How are you? Well, my wife does say that there's after I was born in Glasgow, raised in Glasgow, and of course, growing up in Glasgow in this sort of I was born in 71, so by the end of the 70s, I was getting into scrapes as a young kid, and then into the 80s and all that. Starting to find yourself. Glasgow in the 80s was quite a place, and of course, it's synonymous with a particular lifestyle of like maybe a tad aggressive. And my wife says to this day, although I believe my accent has kind of softened over the years because I've worked abroad and tried to make myself, understood with people who don't speak English and things like that. I think my accent's been kind of dissolved a little bit, and I don't think it's. People laugh when I say this. I don't think it's absolutely sort of determinable as Glaswegian, or maybe it is.
No, I mean I'm understanding what you're saying, so
so that's a good start. But my wife says as soon as there's a situation where you need to get up on your toes and you feel as if you need to protect yourself or us, the inner Ouija comes out.
Hey, I see you, Paul. I see you. I can see it now. It's bulging here.
She said your whole physiology changes and a voice comes out. She said, I've heard it before many times, and you use words that you don't use, but you just go into, because for me, that's like an Alsatian barking.
Yeah. It's a kind of Pavlovian reaction to the stresses of your youth. And look, it's quite understandable. Isn't it wonderful that all of these things in the kind of foundry of our upbringing are mixed together to make us into a kind of precious metal, in a sense that if we were just experiencing the same thing throughout our lives, we'd be fine, but we wouldn't be quite the people we are. So I think it's important to embrace all of that history with all of its kind of rough edges as well. All of the things that we do that perhaps with hindsight we wish we hadn't done, but we have done, so we can't get away from it. They make us the people we are. It sounds a bit kind of lifestyle guru-ish.
I like it. Embrace embrace all the people that you are. You have a sister, Joanne, right?
Yeah, I have a wonderful.
How was the relationship? How was the relationship with Joanne? Were you protective? Were you?
Look, hang on a minute. Let me just.
Were you nasty?
Let me find a picture of me and my sister, because I think this picture here kind of exemplifies. There we are. That one there. I'm just going to shut the office window because somebody's decided to drive their tractor around rather noisily. So here we are. Here's me and my sister Joanne. So she is teaching me perhaps my love of words by helping me read a book. So my father was, as I say, the editor of a local paper. At this stage, perhaps he was a sub-editor or something, but he'd occasionally come home with the newspaper photographer in tow, and as a consequence of having these professional pictures taken, our childhood, at least, is well documented in black and white. And that sort of is a posed picture, but it's a lovely picture nonetheless. And that just shows you, I think, in essence, my sister with her, helping hand, literally a helping hand there, and a stupid younger brother.
I would love to this day if you came across something that you were slightly sort of befuddled by, that if you just went like that. Oh, he's always done it. He's always done it.
Finger slipped up the nose occasionally, probably as well. So Joanne is a lovely, lovely woman. She is the, in a sense, the calm and sensible one, and the small c conservative one. And I'm sure by comparison, I know by comparison, she thinks that I'm the noisy, reckless, and impetuous one. But two peas from the same pod can be different, can't they?
Totally, big time. So let's pull into Harlow College. So you came to that point where you had to make some decisions from school, right? So what was on the table? I'm interested. So there were directions and there were possible doors and possible routes, and I'm interested in sliding doors. I mean, you're here today more than likely because of that step that you took towards journalism at Harlow College, right? It's kind of one of the things that's kind of led to today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right.
What else was on the table?
Well, the sliding door concept, I think, is a good one because, sliding doors, by definition, I guess, your route ahead is blocked because the door slides across in front of you, but that leaves a gap to the left or the right, which is yours to walk through if you'd like. So, given my interest and reasonable sort of ability as far as maths and physics, not maths actually, that's wrong, physics and chemistry and technical drawing were concerned, all, careers masters are like, careers teachers, they sort of push you towards whatever you seem to be good at. And I kind of get that. So for me, it was, work as an engineer, be a civil engineer, be a mechanical engineer, be an automotive engineer. So I signed up to go to university to study mechanical engineering, either at Loughborough or Sussex. And then women, beer, cars, and life basically intervened to close the door to university, which I'm not at all regretful of. But in closing, it opened up other possibilities. So I'd have gone to university, I'd have studied engineering. I kind of had a dream, like a lot of kids of my generation, to become a pilot and to fly in the RAF after university. But all of that didn't happen for various reasons I won't go into. But what opened was kind of a blank sheet, a summer of love, a summer of beer, a summer of driving my Morris Minor around the Bedfordshire countryside. And I thought, I like this. I like getting paid
This is
to do
quite
a
good, yeah.
part-time job and have a girlfriend and be able to buy beer and stuff like that. So that's where my career took a change. I became a window cleaner to finance my love of women and beer and cars. And my mother quite wisely said, look, window cleaning, bless all the window cleaners who might be watching this right now, window cleaning isn't a career move, not for a 19, 20-year-old kid. You need to, do something else. And I said, oh, don't be stupid, Mum. This is great. I'm getting paid £400 a week, cash in hand.
Yeah.
Why would I want to change? And then winter came, and I realised she was absolutely right, because window cleaning and the winter months don't go together for all sorts of reasons.
No.
So I was just casting around for something to do to fill in the winter, really, before the next window cleaning season was upon us. And my dad said, just casually, just as a throwaway aside, why don't you come and see what it's like working as a reporter on a local paper? And I said, what local paper would that be, Dad? There's that look again.
The finger up there.
Exactly. What would that be, Dad? And he said, well, maybe you could come and work on the Beds and Bucks Observer in Leighton Buzzard, of all places, and just have a couple of days of work experience. And I did. And I was stunned. I surprised myself. I absolutely loved it from the get-go. And my dad, being wise, said, well, look, you're not getting a job here because that's not fair. Just because I'm the boss doesn't mean you should get a job. He said, you want a job as a newspaper reporter? Well, then get yourself a job. So I got a piece of paper and I drew 50-mile radius circles around the family home and just applied to every single newspaper in the first 50 miles, nothing. The next 50 miles, nothing. And then just over 100 miles away in a place called Reading, the editor was wise enough or stupid enough to say, yes, why don't you become a cub reporter on the Reading Chronicle? Bless him.
Now, for those of us who don't understand journalism terms, what is a cub reporter?
A cub reporter is like an apprentice. So you think of an apprenticeship more to do with perhaps the building trade or being a car mechanic. You get apprenticed, you get indentured, and you do 2 or 3 or 4 years of practical learning alongside an expert, a qualified bricklayer or mechanic or chippy. And bizarrely, journalism back in the day, that was the only way into newspaper journalism. You were a cub reporter, an apprentice reporter, in effect, alongside an expert who sort of took you under his or her wing and showed you the ropes. And 3 years later, after a couple of sort of periods at a local college, a technical college, you kind of were considered safe enough to let out on the streets.
So this was when, the 70s?
This was very early 80s. So
very early 80s. I've just got these romantic visions of these like senior reporters like dressed like the Sweeney, saying, right, let's jump in the Granada with a cub. We're going to take him down. There's a fire somewhere. Yeah. We're going to, brilliant.
Well, we were far too young or poor to drive. I mean, I got 15 quid a week and I thought that was a lot of money. and about 12 quid of that went on a bedsit underneath the roof of a kind of house in multiple occupancy. But it left £3 for food and beer, which seemed to be quite enough at the time. But certainly you couldn't afford to run a car, although what did I have? I did have, there's this car here. There was that was my second ever car, Morris Minor. And as a consequence of not being able to run a car, not being able to afford to run a car, you jumped in the back or the front seat, the passenger seat, I should say, of the chief photographer's car. And the chief photographers were always flashy, going back to that Sweeney trope. All the photographers seemed to have sheepskin jackets. They all smoked. They all drank heavily.
Sideburns, like just solid.
Really big chops, sideburns, centre partings. Yeah. And then up in the motor, we're going out on a call. And you go out
with the big flash bulbs. Oh, I'm there.
Pictures. That's it. Oh, yeah, just that. Oh, yeah. And I'd be there with the notebook, taking it down.
I love this. I absolutely love it. What? I mean, just give us a sense of cub reporting. What kind of stuff were you covering in the first job? What kind of stuff were you doing?
To start with, you are let loose on really, really dangerous stuff like go along to the local flower show and make a note of all of the winners in, the dahlia class or the carnation class or the large marrow that looks like a willy class. And once you've kind of learned that it's really important to be accurate with the flower show results, because if you don't, Elsie from number 53 at Asia Avenue will be really, really cross and cancel her subscription to the newspaper. Once you'd learned through kind of bitter experience not to upset Elsie and to get your reporting right, then you were kind of allowed to do more kind of senior stuff, perhaps a bit of magistrates court reporting, maybe a bit of local council reporting, perhaps parish councils and stuff like that. And I used to go along to a parish council in the depths of sort of central Berkshire, Burfield Parish Council, I think it was. And it was me and a chap called Phil Taylor, who was a cub reporter at the same time as me. Perhaps I should change his name. It was Phil Smiggins. And me and Phil Smiggins...
Bill Smiggins.
Bill Smiggins, that's it. Me and Bill used to take it in turns to report on the machinations at Burfield Parish Council. And when it was my week, it was really boring stuff like a long discussion ensued about, whether to replace the roses around the war memorial and whether to pay an extra £5 to have the grass around the war memorial cut twice a year rather than just the normal once. And Order. I'd diligently write this up and come back with just rubbish stories that didn't even make it onto page 743, frankly. When it was his turn, his week, it used to be front page splash, councillors having affairs with the mayor and one another, and vandalism in the rose patch behind the council offices. Anyway, cut a long story short, he made it all up. Where did he end up, Bill Smiggins, after working at the Reading Chronicle?
In the pokey, in the jail.
No, on the Sun.
On the Sun, just
the Sun
pretty much the same.
On the Sun, what won it?
And he was just making stuff up.
Well, I couldn't possibly say that so explicitly, but he was economical with the verite. I think it's
Bill Smiggins. It was written all over his name.
And he, bless his cotton socks, let me redeem him a little in the eyes of the Crux Cast listeners and viewers. He used to pull his press pass out at a nightclub in order to impress the ladies. He'd say, Bill Smiggins, Reading Chronicle, fancy a dance, love? And I'd be in awe.
Oh, of course I would.
Yeah, I'd be like sitting at the edge, plucking up the courage to ask the pretty girl for a dance and never getting that courage. And you just go straight up, Bill Smiggins, Reading Chronicle, fancy a dance? And then he'd show the press pass.
Oh, I love it. Absolutely love it. That should be the title of one of your books.
Yeah, it would be counterproductive, I think, these days, showing your media pass in order to try to leave some advantage at a place of ill repute.
So you do the hard yards, you learn your craft and your trade, but you're also studying it as well at college, right? Harlow College, studying the art and science of journalism.
Yeah.
And then get into. So when do you leave there? When was that you left Harlow College, sort of timeline wise?
Okay, so once you've done your 3 years of apprenticeship, once you've completed your indentures, you get a nice certificate to say you're now a fully fledged reporter. and the newspaper can either offer you a full-time job, or you have to fly and find something yourself. So I can't remember whether I had to fly or whether I decided to fly, but I was casting around for the next sort of step. And the next natural step for a lot of people was into local radio or to radio of some sort. So newspapers, radio, and then perhaps with the distant idea that you might get into television. I mean, I think now probably I'd want to stay in radio. I think that's the purest medium in some respects. The pictures get in the way in telly terms, and it kind of gets into your head, radio, more successfully as a consequence of not having the pictures hindering that. But anyway, I got a job on a local radio station, an independent local radio station, and there was a chap who was weird. Here's me libeling a whole heap of people. There was a weird...
Remember to change the name.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not going to change this fella's name because he was just weird. There was no sort of strangeness in any other respect.
He won't be listening.
He was very odd, and a Kiwi, and his name was Paul McKenna, and he was doing the early morning programme on this radio station in Bedfordshire. And he was the early jock, and I was the early news and sports presenter. And you could tell at the time he got something about him that was kind of showbizy and marketable. And of course, Paul McKenna then went on to be look into my eyes. That Paul McKenna.
So, did you say he's a Kiwi?
Put a spell on me. And the reason I'm here today is that I'm still actually. I mean, I have no way of proving this or disproving it. Maybe I am still in a trance, in some kind of hypnotic trance.
Did you say Paul McKenna's a Kiwi?
I'm pretty sure he's a Kiwi. Yeah, he
really
turned out to be, but I'm sure he was a Kiwi. Or if he's not a Kiwi, he's perhaps got some Kiwi connection.
Yeah. So even so, it's funny that guy that was running that show was going home at night going with a watch. Come on, practice. Come on, pay attention. Come on, look into it. You feel sleepy, don't you? Eat the onion. It's a delicious apple.
That's right. Where are we? Where am I? Who am I?
Exactly.
Call the 40-year trance.
So, did you enjoy putting the cans on and running radio shows and all? Was that good?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's shameful to say this, to admit to this, but I enjoy the performative element of radio and television and broadcasting. Newspapers are fantastic, don't get me wrong. Writing an article, in your garret room and researching it for weeks and weeks is fantastic. But there's nothing, for me at least, that quite beats the buzz of the performance element of live radio and television in particular. And that's, as I say, it's shameful to even admit, but it gives you a buzz. The heart beats a bit quicker. The adrenaline courses around your system, and it's a thrill to be alive.
Outstanding. But the lure, so you learn your craft on radio, but the lure of TV was just too difficult to avoid, was it not?
Yeah, I mean, that happened slightly by accident, in the sense that I kind of got asked rather than made a big play for it. But because the radio station I work for, I moved from this independent local radio station to a BBC local radio station, which was based at Pebble Mill in Birmingham. Right. And Pebble Mill at 1, and the regional news magazine programme was also based there. So as a journalist, you would be, rubbing shoulders with people who were in telly. Oh, darling, telly. And the bright lights. So it seemed like the natural next step. As I say, now, perhaps with hindsight, I might think, do you know what? It's a bit of a rat race, television. But for as long as it lasted, and it lasted sort of on and off for about 10 or 15 years, it was brilliant. And the most enjoyable part of television production was when I left the BBC, became a freelance in effect, set up a television production company, and then travelled pretty much all around the world making programmes for other people, for BBC, for Channel 4, for Channel 5, for BBC Schools and so on. So behind the scenes rather than on camera, but helping people tell their stories about things that were going on in the world. And some of the gongs that are not at all hidden on the shelf there are things like Royal Television Society awards for best programme and so on. What's
that little white one? That looks very glamorous behind your head. No, further along to the left. Yeah, that looks very glamorous.
No, this is a collector's item. There's There's a program on LinkedIn. I think you may have heard of it.
Oh, no, I see it up close. It's crap.
It's called the Big Breakfast Burrito, and it's an eclectic mix. The Big Live Breakfast Burrito, I should say, to get its name right. It's an eclectic mix of wackiness on a Thursday morning from around about 7:45 until about 8:45, 9 o'clock. There's wine tasting. Who would have thought it at that time in the morning? There's ranting. There's factoids, sometimes double, triple factoids, and so on. And I think it returns this week.
Nonsense.
If you
Nonsense in my view.
So LinkedIn Live, Big Live Breakfast Burrito. I recommend it thoroughly.
I will not be tuning in. So you get into TV. I was interested to find out that there's been a strong vein of the country. The country's always been there. The country's always in there. And in actual fact, I don't know if you're able to show us farm cam. Are you?
I can. Yeah, let me show you
farm cam.
I'm going to show you farm cam. And actually, you'll see. You just twist it around. You'll see tractor cam.
Tractor cam.
Tractor cam. This could be a whole new internet sensation.
It could be tractor cam. Yeah, just keep it on there.
Press number 4. There you go. Look, there is a tractor going across the field outside my office window.
You could just keep that on 24 hours a day on like a live YouTube channel, and people would just lose their minds. There it is. Yeah. There's a little tractor.
Yeah. Yep. So tractor cam. But you're right. Yep. The countryside has featured really, really heavily in my life. I guess partly because growing up in a village, you have friends who work on farms. You're surrounded by countryside. You play in the fields. You work in them as a kid, collecting the hay bales and so on. So it was a significant chunk of my childhood. In the village I grew up, there was no youth club unless you wanted to go to the church youth club, which I didn't particularly fancy. With no offence meant to the church that ran it, but there was a young farmers club, and although I didn't really have any direct connection with farming. It was just a good way of meeting other people, meeting girls, drinking beer, learning a bit about farming. And that theme just almost by accident sort of continued through my working life when I eventually landed the gig to present Farming Today on BBC Radio 4. And then subsequent to that, landed a fantastic gig presenting a programme called Open Country on Radio 4. So definitely, you're right, a rural theme running through it like the words through a stick of Brighton Rock.
Did you ever get up to Scotland?
Yes, yeah, many times actually. A couple of the producers were from Scotland, and as a consequence, I quite liked the idea of going to Scotland at the licensed fee payer's expense to make a program. Of course, here I am again dissing people. They did it for strong and valid editorial,
journalistic
editorial
governance,
reasons.
all of
and
that.
It just happened to be that their family and friends were nearby. So I'd say, given that there's a lot of open countryside in Scotland, open country probably came from Scotland more than its population size would suggest it perhaps should have. But it was always, thrilling to go there and to discover little bits of Scotland that, I would not in a million years have visited otherwise. The Hebrides, the Outer Hebrides.
You were in the Outer Hebrides?
The Flow country and so on. The Outer Hebrides, yeah. You need to take a translator, though, there, actually, Aaron.
Yeah, you do.
I'm just going to close off camera, field cam, because it's getting closer and closer, and I don't want the noise to be off-putting. So just
that's fine. That's all right.
While I close off.
Look at that, an automatic closing window. Oh no, it was manual.
And a rather dirty window, it has to be said.
So
where were we?
So you do have to take a translator up to the Outer Hebrides. I guess you were probably standing with a microphone in farmers' faces, going, "What?"
Well, there was one farmer in particular I remember well, and there, as you know better than I do, they can be quite taciturn, the Scots, and particularly rural Scots, and then very much in particular those sort of furthest away from the central belt, from Edinburgh and Glasgow. So you really have to work hard when you're interviewing Outer Hebrideans with their few words. The words they do speak are carefully chosen and hugely valuable, but you have to ask lots of questions to get enough words to make a half-hour program.
Yeah, especially if you're just getting aye.
Well, exactly. That's what I got. So I said, "Oh, look!" I described this kind of beautiful landscape, and there were some Highland coos. I think he said they were coos, and I thought, "What the heck are coos?" And I kind of looked. I could see some distance at woolly coos, so I thought, "Well, there must be coos." And I said, "Oh, they look beautiful." He says, "Aye." And I thought, blimey, okay, well, we need more than just eye. And how are they? Hilti. And I said, sorry? He said, Hilti. And I said, really, forgive me, softy southerner, Sassenach idiot. What does Hilti mean? He says, Hilti. And I said, sorry, I still don't get it. There was no translator to be seen.
Yeah.
Hilti. Hilti, in the name of God. Hilti. And of course, you know what he meant. I didn't.
I'm not sure I do, to be honest.
Hilti, they're healthy.
Oh, the
healthy cows. Hilti coos.
Oh my
Hilti coos. And I think that the interview, the poor old producer who had, came back with hours of material, probably had an hour's worth of 3 words: Hilti, coos, and I. Put it this way: he didn't have a starring role in that program.
No, not particularly. Not particularly. Has the onset of like unqualified me been able to set up a little show and a little program to interview people like you? Has the onset of that damaged journalism in any way?
No, not at all. I actually think the opposite. I think it has enhanced journalism. A lot of rather pompous nonsense is talked about citizen journalism, but what it has done is it's put the ability, the power, if you like, that used to reside in the hands of national broadcasters like the BBC, powerful, normally rich men, the Murdochs of this world, and so on. The ability to communicate with a large audience has been put into the hands of ordinary folk like you and I, with limited means, but with, I think, something useful to say, whether it's about business in the way that you're helping businesses with their social media and with their communications and helping them with their marketing. I think it's brilliant that LinkedIn has the ability to go live, for example, because it just helps the business of being human immeasurably. I mean, that does sound pompous, but you know what I mean. To be human is to be a social animal, and in order to be a happy human, one needs to communicate and converse. And even if it's just sitting around talking nonsense and picking fleas out of one another's fur, I think this kind of stuff facilitates that. It's wonderful. It's been transformational to the extent that some very clever people have called this the post-Gutenberg era. So Johannes Gutenberg was the mechanic or the engineer who invented the movable type printing press and meant that the masses could read the printed word. Before that, it needed a load of monks, illustrating the St. James Bible with a quill and with some, wet ink. And that was a laborious process. And it meant that most of us, frankly, not that long ago, were, either semi-literate or illiterate. We simply couldn't write and read. Now, the transformation that the social media and all of these Restream and LinkedIn Live and social media tools have offered us have transformed it in a different, but in an equally profound way.
So I'm glad that it was that Gutenberg and not the post-Steve Gutenberg Police Academy comedy actor era, because I was thinking, what impact has he had on media to this date? So yeah, well rescued there. I've got a particular bone with a particular kind of, perhaps not journalism, but sensationalistic television reporting, and it just drives me up the wall. Now, I did a wee bit of presentation work with an institution that kind of tore me down and built me back up again, because I used to have to be a media responder for a company if there was an accident. It was an oil company, and I was the one that was shoved out front to deal with the press. So they sent me away for some decent training. So those techniques and those methods, albeit a while ago, and they've probably evolved. I had a few of those, and I see a lot of those when it's like It's like, I'm going to say pineapple. I'm going to say, no matter what they talk about, I'm going to talk about my pineapple. So, Mr. Such and Such, there was this and blah, blah, blah. Well, first off, I'd like to thank the
British
folk for
public
that.
for...
And at the end of the day, our pineapples are, and they're just off, and they're just going to talk about whatever they want to talk about, regardless. The question could be about penny farthings, and they're still going to talk about their pineapples. But there is one thing that drives me up the wall, and I think it's really cheap, and it probably grates on you, which is, I'm here standing where I am today, where there was a large explosion and there's been a fire. One of the residents of the local area said there was a huge explosion and then a fire and people ran away. A local resident had this to say, and he says, there was just a huge explosion
and a massive fire.
And then people ran away.
In all my years. And then the police arrived. It was like something off the Ruddy Sweeney.
Yeah. And I've heard.
I couldn't believe it. And then we were told to stay at home with our doors and windows closed because there's some kind of toxicity in the smoke. I'm
Eric Doyle reporting.
I am.
Eric Doyle reporting when there was a big explosion, a big fire, and people ran away.
Yeah. I think 24-hour news. In all seriousness, what has happened is that there's a finite amount happening in the world, and of course, most of what's happening is beyond our reach. In any case, so in order to fill a kind of 24-hour rolling news cycle, one has to set the news bar perhaps a little lower than when you only had the news at 10 or the news at 9. And as a consequence, perhaps more is made of stuff than it warrants, in the grand scheme of things. And I can remember once as a very bang average newsreader, throwing, as it's called in the trade, to a reporter out on the streets on the scene of some kind of crime. And at the end of the report, which told us everything we needed to know about this crime, so we knew everything, but for stylistic reasons, we had to say, well, joining us live now from the scene, I'm pleased to say that we're joined by our action news reporter, Gary Hudson. A very good evening, Gary, and what's the latest? What's happening? And he said, I kid you not, live on telly, not a fat lot, actually. Because he was like me, a little cynical of dressing news up as something that was more important than it really was. And I kind of stifled a laugh, bearing in mind that this was about, probably quite nasty crime. So laughing isn't kind of the thing to do. So I went, and so what precisely have they been doing? And then he said, it gets worse. Well, like Plod normally does, goes around banging on doors and asking people whether they saw anything. And after that, I said, well, that's Gary Hudson now, reporter at the scene. Thank you for your input, Gary. And now sport.
Oh, brilliant. Well done, Gary. Most people that have a vocation or something they feel really strongly about that have little heroes in their mind. Growing up, when you were going through the yards as a reporter or as an interviewer in the telly world or in radio, who did it really well that we would know? Who did you admire?
Gosh. Well, it's so long ago that some of those sort of idols kind of are long dead. I mean, he became a bit of a cliche. Robin Day, the erstwhile presenter of Panorama in the very early days. And I used to, I for my own sanity, I avoid news and current affairs a little more these days. But the Today programme was a staple in my house. And Brian Redhead and John Timpson were on the Today programme when I was first listening to it. So we're talking about 40 plus years ago, potentially. So those people seem to be cool under pressure. They seem to be smart enough to ask the right kind of questions. And the kind of right questions are the questions that people like you and I, normal people, would want to ask if they were sitting in the chair doing the interview. And I think there's a danger, and I've certainly been guilty of this, that you rather overinflate your own role as a journalist or as a presenter and forget that it's all about the person at the other end. And therefore, ask a question, shut up, wait for the reply. So heroes were Day, Redhead, Timpson. I quite enjoy sort of John Humphreys, now retired. I quite enjoy Jeremy Paxman, now retired, for their sort of curmudgeonly, contrary-wise kind of Rottweilerishness. But again, I think when you've been doing it a long time, you get known for that kind of shtick, and you
Yeah,
almost have to kind of do that
play
shtick
up to it.
all the
Yeah,
time. And I mean, I've heard John Humphreys, for example, interview people who have nothing to hide, who aren't politicians, who are just ordinary, humble folk, and he's gone at them. And I've thought,
yeah. There was no
why
need.
do that? You're not going
It's a
to get the
cheap
best out
shot.
of somebody by being, like that.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Who was the growing up? I remember watching TV and watching, although I maybe didn't understand it at that age of my life, probably wouldn't now. I think he was a political presenter, South African chap. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah,
who
yeah.
I mean, right?
You mean John Pilger?
Could have been, could have
John
been,
Pilger?
could have been. I
Or
can't remember, but
Roger Foot in the Door. What was his name? Roger. Yeah, there's a couple who were kind of very, and I think this is kind of almost a journalistic kind of predisposition that they are very anti-establishment. They're very cynical or skeptical of people in positions of authority, and I think that perhaps it shouldn't be cynicism; it should be skepticism. Those were people who were very skeptical of people's intentions and who had this real laser-like focus on
oh yeah,
illuminating the darker corners of apartheid regimes or of corruption in governments or in unfairness, and that's a kind of journalism that I think is much more ultimately much more noble and productive than an awful lot of today's journalism, which I would characterize more as infotainment. It's the
yeah,
kind of stuff that is the Muzak equivalent of journalism, and
yeah,
the equivalent of live music and lift music, it being the
yeah.
comparator there.
We've had the stuffing kicked out of us for the last couple of years, and regardless of whether you were a lawyer, a dentist, a truck driver, worked in a shop, were a private equity investment banker, we've all been impacted by the last couple of years,
Yeah,
commercially, domestically.
yeah.
What's in your view? What's it from your sphere of visibility and influence? What's it done from us? Is it taken anything away from us? Has it crushed anything?
Undoubtedly, it has, and I think we'll probably discover in due course, possibly even in years to come, the impact of COVID. And I talk to my neighbours who've got a young child, and developmentally they're worried that because she missed a couple of years of interaction with primary school, or I should say preschool attendees, other children, she is not as gregarious, perhaps not as developmentally advanced as she would be, indeed as many children would be, had they had all of that social interaction. For somebody who's now in his 60s, who has had a lifetime of social interaction, I actually found paradoxically, COVID, the pandemic, or the consequences of it, lockdown, actually really quite nice, in the sense that it gave me back a day and a half a week that I would otherwise have been spent driving, having a cold beer and a bowl of chips in a godforsaken Express by Holiday Inn or Premier in Edinburgh or Glasgow or Inverness or London or Manchester. So I travelled a lot, and I've found that it's given me a new sense of the value, the incredible value of time, and how if we waste it, it's gone and you're never going to get it back. So I actually prefer, because I'm a glass half full rather than a glass half empty kind of guy in any case, I prefer to think of all of the positives that this long moment of reflection has given us. That said, Eric, of course, I'm not for 1 minute belittling the awful tragedy, and I think that is for once the right word, that has befallen so many people, 100,000 plus dead, and many people suffering with long COVID, many businesses, founded as a consequence. So it's awful, awful, awful. But just from an entirely selfish perspective, I found it quite a useful lesson in slowing down and doing the things that I really want to do with life, or what's left of
Right.
it, without sounding too maudlin. Because at 60, you ain't got as much ahead of you as you've got.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
I'm going to live to 120, and I'm going to go on the Crux Cast 2,428 when I'm 120. Let's make a date now.
Let's do it. So So yeah, excellent. We've all. I love that the fact that you've looked at life, you've looked at everything that makes up life, and said, right, this is an opportunity here, and there is opportunity here. What are your hopes for moving forward? What have we learned, and where are we going? What do you see? Maybe change the direction or whatever. Where do we go?
Well, I'm a softy, bleeding heart liberal, and I do believe genuinely in the goodness, the innate goodness in people. And I think that sometimes that goodness just gets tried and tested to breaking point sometimes by external circumstances like COVID-19. And we do ourselves a disservice by, growling and growling and getting cheesed off, perhaps very understandably with politicians. But my basic starting point is always that people are good.
Yep.
Rather than bad. And in circumstances that I've seen people in adversity, as a reporter traveling all around the world, to Africa during the civil war in Rwanda, to Yugoslavia when that country was falling apart, I have seen people, yes, being very bad, but I've seen more people being good in their response to that badness. And my hope is that with all of the stress that's going on right now because of the cost of living crisis, the consequences of Brexit, the continued fallout of the COVID pandemic, because of what's going on in Ukraine and so on, I genuinely believe that there is a renaissance on the way. I mean, I might be completely misguided. I might just be an old hippie that wants the best for the world. But I think there is an opportunity, and what we're crying out for is I should say, plural, leaders who can lead us through the hard times along that clear path to a brighter, better place, because I do believe that that's what people want. And that's not me launching my presidential campaign for 2025 or my prime ministership campaign for 2020.
And with that said, I will be standing as for the candidate for
the monster raving loony party, the South Shropshire constituency.
Right. Okay. I think that's a beautiful sort of full stop point there.
Sorry to butt in on your train of thought there, but just on that line, it's funny how things happen in your life that you didn't plan for, you didn't anticipate, and one of the happenstances, the happy serendipitous things that's happened over the last 2 years is that I've got into contact with a couple of people, a father and son, who are trying to transform the way that older people, particularly those with nursing care needs and dementia needs, are getting. At the moment, my mum is languishing. I think it's probably the wrong word, too strong a word, but she could be looked after better. And it's not the staff that are failing her, because they're wonderful. It is the system that isn't right. And these two people, they call themselves the Maracuja Club. You may have seen them on LinkedIn. They're really determined to transform the way that the care of older people is facilitated, is delivered. And I would encourage anybody that's watching this just to have a little Google of the Maracuja Club, have a look on LinkedIn at what they're up to, because I really believe that they're onto something. Because I, for one, as a 61-year-old, who knows? Dementia may get me, old age may get me. I might go early with a heart attack or something else. Who knows? But if I need nursing care, I don't want to go into the kind of place my mum's in. I hear people say, in all seriousness, they say to me, if I'm like your mum, shoot me. My wife says to me, without way of a joke, she says, if I ever get like your mum, don't put me in one of those bloody homes. I'd rather die. What does that say about the system in this country? I know that's a bit serious for the end of the Crux Cast, but
no, I think it's a good point. Because we had intended to talk about it, but we went off in tangents. So the Maracuja Club, and you do a bit of work with these guys, a bit of unpaid work, just to support them, because you believe that this is really important work, right?
Yeah, well, what happens is, again, it sort of ties into the point I was making about getting time back. When you get a bit of your time back that you didn't realise you were missing, because you're not driving everywhere, you're not staying overnight in hotels and so on, because you're able to service your clients in this way, online, that in those moments you can start thinking, and perhaps it's part of maturing at long last. My mum was sentient. She'd go, "Oh, you're finally growing up. Nice to see. It's only taken you 61 years, fella." But I think you start thinking, well, is there a legacy? Is there something that you could leave that kind of makes up for the awful feeling that at the end, it's the end, and that's it. You're just a footnote, and not even that in kind of human history. That feeling of not leaving some kind of mark, and that's what drives poets, filmmakers, authors. That's what drives all of us ultimately, I think, to make a significant contribution that lasts a little longer than the 70 years and 10 or however many we're allotted on this mortal coil. Mortal coil, bit of Shakespeare there, bit of culture.
In the notes it said, let's finish on a joke. No. Yeah, exactly. Scratch that from the notes. Thank you so much for being with us. I don't think this is going to be the last time we'll see you. So all the things that we said we'd cover that we didn't cover, we'll do it next time.
All right. Really easy. I would be delighted to come back. It's always a pleasure chatting to you, Eric. And you're doing really good work. The breakfast burrito, we touched on it earlier. I got sent a mug because I entered one of the online competitions. It's a funny old thing, the breakfast burrito. For those who don't know, Eric is the breakfast burrito, along with a couple of colleagues, but he's there pressing the buttons every Thursday morning and
I'm just a button presser.
The show on the road. It's wonderful. I watch it if you haven't watched it before, and it's one of those kind of strange things that you can't quite put your finger on what it is about it that's seductive and compelling and exciting and interesting. It's just I think the nicest thing that you could say about it is a weird mix, but it works.
Yeah, totally. I will do a podcast about it one day, but I when I got my LinkedIn license, I decided I wasn't just going to do. Well, I've ended up doing a talking heads that, but I wasn't just going to do which was just what everyone else is doing. I wanted to put what happens if you put TGI Friday. Don't forget your toothbrush. The Jonathan Ross Last Resort Show. Vic and Bob's Big Night Out. Shooting Stars, Taskmaster, all the things that I love and that we watch in this house. What happens if you put them into a mixer and apply no money to them? Don't spend any money and just get a bunch of your mates and your friends around and put a loose script. You do this, you do that. I'll do this, you do that. Will people walk forward? My vote was yes, they will, because people love music and wine and chat and jokes and poetry and fun and seeing people relax and open their shoulders. So I put a $5 down as a little bet to say I think people might walk over and look at this, and people might stay. Can we create the idea? It's people talk about creating communities. The community was always there. We just created like a tent at Glastonbury, and there was some decent sounds coming out of it and a bit of laughter, and people can walk into it and feel relaxed.
Yeah, people can coalesce around that, and that's my feeling around sort of LinkedIn in particular, but other social networks as well, is that they are a wonderful way of establishing and growing communities. As I said earlier, in my pompous flights of fancy, that human beings are social creatures. We are, apes really, and apes like sitting around chatting and picking nits from one another, and LinkedIn Live facilitates that, and it makes us feel, I think, more human. And the scale and the reach of something like the Big Live Breakfast Burrito, of something like this, the Crux Cast, is that the tyranny of distance and to an extent also the tyranny of sort of time is relieved, is lifted by this. You're up there in Aberdeenshire, I'm down here in Shropshire, and yet the audience is all over the world potentially. And isn't that wonderful? To get us together into the same literal big tent would be prohibitively expensive and time.
Totally. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Andrew Sasser says, community that want to be entertained. Yeah, and he said, put a link in the comments about them, please. Can I put a link in the comments, or is that something?
Of course you can. Of course you can. You can. So the Maracuja Club, you can I'll send you. Well, you'll see the link to this because you're in it. And just put in a comment a link to it, and people will be able to find it.
Oh, okay. So when I'm back on LinkedIn and I look at the recording of this, I can put the link in there.
You can put the link in. Here's the thing I was talking about. Great guys, give them a follow. Here's the link. Bosh.
All right. No, I'll do that. I wasn't sure whether I could sort of respond live, as it were, right now to Andrew, or whether it was something that was best left until afterwards on LinkedIn. But
I think it's better to put the link in there. People can click on it, get straight through, and also you're leaving an impression because lots of people will watch this tomorrow, Friday,
Yeah.
or the weekend, or whatever.
I'll be sharing it with all my friends. I'll be sharing it with all my family.
Lovely.
We don't need to worry about the initial figures. What's important is how many people watch it online and how many people watch it on Watch Again. That's what commissioning editors used to say. We need to make this an event. We need to make this must-watch television. We need to make this appointment-to-view programming. And, of course, all that's up in the air now.
Appointment-to-view programming. I love it.
But only 3 people have watched it. Yeah, but imagine how many people will be talking about it in the pub tonight. Probably one of them, if you're lucky, maybe none. But now,
but it'll be the right one.
It'll be the right one.
It'll be the right one.
The commissioning editor's boss.
Listen, we could do this all day. We could actually do an entire afternoon, and probably should one day. That would be fun. Just do an afternoon and invite people on to chat with us. Maybe this is the start of a new show. You never know.
I'm happy to help in any way that I can, and it's been fun. And thank you again for asking me on. It's been a pleasure. Crux Cast 64. I thought perhaps you were going to say, and that's your age, Rich.
I was going to ask at one point, but I thought it was rude.
When I'm 64.
We will catch you again, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.